There's a little introductory passage that I'm going to go back to after we go through the four sons. In the Sheraton Hotel, I got it on page 15. And if you don't have that one, see if you can find it. If you can, we'll have somebody find it for you. You have it? Okay. Now, this is a very, on the surface, very simplistic passage. It's very subtle. It's quite complicated. I'm going to read through it. Even the translation can be questioned. Different translations can be questioned. Just you'll have the content in front of you, and then we'll start working with the questions. The wise son, though we'll deal with that translation later. The wise son, what does he say? What are the testimonies, laws and statutes which Hashem our God commanded you? Now there are three different words here for mitzvos. These are categories of mitzvos. And there are other words that aren't being used here. And on the surface, eidos are symbolic actions, where if you don't know the connection to a historical event or to a Jewish value, it would seem to be absolutely arbitrary. And when you know that you're expressing that idea by the action that you do. Like putting on tefillin or eating matzah, to a great extent like Shabbos. You have to know the external connections to understand what they refer to. Chukim are mitzvos whose meanings aren't widely, publicly known. You may hear a chok being described as something that has no meaning, has no reason, has no explanation. According to almost every commentator, that's a mistake. There are midrashim, and certainly in the Zohar and other commentaries. There's a book called Sefer HaChinuch, which goes through all 613 commandments and gives reasons for all of them. So it can't just be that there's a whole batch of mitzvos which have no reasons whatsoever. That's why it's important to think of them as mitzvos whose meanings aren't open and obvious, maybe dependent upon Kabbalistic ideas. Mishpatim are roughly principles of action that you would have thought of on your own, even if you hadn't been commanded to do them. That's the way the Gemara characterizes. So the wise son first starts by classifying mitzvos into these three categories. And then he asks, what are they that Hashem our God has commanded you? That's his question. And you answer him according to the laws of Pesach, because this is taking place on Pesach. And it gives an example of one of the laws of Pesach. And that is, after you eat the Pesach, which here would mean the Paschal sacrifice, which is part of the meal at the Seder, after you eat that, don't eat anything else. No dessert after the meat. That's the last thing you should eat. And the reason that's given is that the taste of the Paschal sacrifice should last with you. Shouldn't be replaced by another taste. Of course, we'll have to understand why would that be the example. Certainly, that's not the most important law of the Pesach. So why would it be picked as the example of what you should teach him? That's the wise son. Russia, the wicked one, what does he say? What is this service to you? Now the Haggadah, the author of the Haggadah comments, look at his language. To you, he said, but not to him. He's asking us, what is this to you? That means he's not included. So he has excluded himself from the congregation. And since he did that, he has denied the ikar. Now the word ikar has several uses in Hebrew. It can mean principle. And for a long time, I was trying to figure out which principle does the Haggadah mean when it says that he denied this fundamental principle. A short time ago, I came across another usage of this word where the word ikar refers to the Creator. Not to a principle, but to the Creator's existence. And Here, it probably means he's denied the Creator. And therefore, we respond to him in very stringent and condemnatory terms. But we have to explain when it says, since he excluded himself from the congregation, therefore he's denied the Creator, that connection is not obvious. So we'll come back to that.
Where did you see that source?
I saw it in the Gemara, it's actually several places.
But Iker means Hashem?
It can refer to Hashem. There's a difference between meaning and reference.
Yeah.
Sin and bedeutung, if you know Frege. We're talking now what it refers to. Iker means something like fundamental, but it can be a fundamental principle or the fundamental of all existence. And there are contexts in which it means to deny God's existence. Turn your back on God, so to speak. So I have to explain why someone who excludes himself from the congregation would be called one who denies God's existence. And the Haggadah goes on, you, speaking to the person who's running the Seder, you should blunt his teeth and say, now, well, okay, I'll read it, and say to him, that's what it seems to be written here, say to him, for the sake of this, Hashem did for me when I left Egypt. That's a quotation from a verse. And the leader says supposed to go on, for me, he did for me, and not for him. If he had been there, he would not have been redeemed. Now, if you pay very careful attention to the language here, there's something off track. Let's try it again. You should blunt his teeth and say to him. Now, the next words are in quotation marks. These are the words that you should address to him. Now, here are the words. For the sake of this, Hashem did for me when I left Egypt, for me and not for him. Wait a minute. I'm talking to the wicked son, am I not? Shouldn't it say for me and not for you? I'm talking to him. It said say to him. If I'm talking to him, it should say for me and not for you. Why does it say for me and not for him? There's a shift here in the reference. You got a question?
Oh, the article puts the quotation after for me.
Right, but then it's not clear what how it's supposed to be addressed. In other words, if I say these words, this is what Hashem did for me when I left Egypt. Is that addressed to him at all? How is it addressed to him? Doesn't refer to him at all. And I'm drawing out the conclusion. It would mean that I say that to him and then I turn away from him and talk to everybody else. Even that would have to be explained. I'm not addressing him, I'm talking about him. So we'll come back to that. Tam, this is a person who's pure, who's straightforward, who could be simple. There are various meanings to the word tam. What does he say? He says, mazos. What is this? He's interested, just that his intellectual background is very limited to the point where all he can say is, what is this? And you should say to him, with a strong hand, Hashem took us out of Egypt from the house of bondage. And then, the last one, who doesn't know how to ask. So you should open him up. You should open up the discussion with him. Doesn't know how to ask? Don't wait for him to ask. As it says, you shall declare to your son on that day, saying, for the sake of this, Hashem did for me when I left Egypt. One of the commentators asks an absolutely bombshell of a question here. How old do you think the simple son is? He says, mazos. When you have children, you'll see, an 18-month-old can ask that, right? Let's say he's 2 years old, okay? Now, the next one doesn't know how to ask. What doesn't he know how to ask? Doesn't know how to ask anything? Even the question of the simple son? So how old is he? 12 months old? 14 months old? Oh, But then you should open up and say to him, you should declare to your son in that saying, for the sake of this Hashem did for me when I left Egypt. That's what you should say to him. Really? To the 12-month-old? Does seem like a bit of an exaggeration. Right? If he can't ask, what is this? And you say, listen, thousands of years ago, we left Egypt. And when that Hashem did for me, it does seem like it's a little out of proportion. And also, notice that the verse that is used for the one who doesn't know how to ask is also the same verse that's used for the wicked son. Why is that? And then there's one, yeah, you want to say something?
Yeah, what if, like, it's not based on age, and the person that doesn't know how to inquire just is disinterested entirely to the point where they don't want to ask questions?
Well, I don't think that would be naturally described as doesn't know how to ask. This seems to be speaking inability. There's one other question, there are other questions I'll come to after, but there's one other question here which I haven't seen really discussed, but how are these four categories chosen? Wise, wicked, simple, doesn't know how to ask? Would that cover everybody? Maybe there are people who aren't in any of those categories? Is there any relationship between the categories? Any natural connection between the categories? It's not obvious, right? Yeah.
If it's like you were saying before, where it could be based on age, maybe as you grow up, you slowly go from the one who doesn't know how to ask and turn into the wise child through studying. And it's like depicting different phases of growing up, where you're a child and it's simple, you're a teenager and you're a little bit rebellious, and eventually you turn into the wise son.
The first time you left that one out. You went from the doesn't know how to ask to the simple to the wise. You left the wicked one out.
The wicked is like a teenager. That's
Conceivable, but something has to be said. Something has to be said about how this works. So Eliyahu Kitov, who asked the question about the one who doesn't know how to ask, has a fundamental idea here, and it organizes the set of four, and it makes it clear what it's doing here in the Haggadah in this fashion. He says there are two verses in the book of Proverbs, back to back, which have diametrically opposed suggestions on how to deal with the world. One is, Al ta'an ksil ki ivalto, don't answer the fool according to his crookedness. Pen yeh chacham be'anav, lest he be wise in his own eyes. And the other one is, Anei ksil ki ivalto, answer the fool according to his crookedness. Pen yeh chacham be'anav, lest he be wise in his own eyes. So you're reading, it's back to back. One says, don't answer the fool, and the other says, do answer the fool. And this is King Solomon, boys, it's got to be something going on here. So Eliyahu Kitov makes the obvious remark that there are two types of fools. There is a fool who's so convinced of his foolishness that when you talk to him, it's like he has a communication device with only one button, send. While you're talking, his mind is off base or he's thinking about baseball. He doesn't care what you say. He just has things to tell you because you're just lost. It's like the Palestinian protesters, right? They don't listen to what you have to say. That's why he shouts you down, because they don't want to hear you. There's nothing you can teach them. They already know all the truth. They know it perfectly. And they're colossal ignorance and foolishness. And therefore, they are only there to project to you. Says King Solomon, you're confronted with a fool like that, don't answer him. And the reason you shouldn't answer is because you're going to appear equal to him. Imagine someone listening to the conversation. He's saying his spiel. I talk. He doesn't listen, doesn't respond to what I say. He says the next piece of his spiel, and I talk. He sounds completely prejudiced and closed-minded, and I sound stupid. Don't you realize who you're talking to? Don't you realize you're not listening? Don't you realize you didn't come for a dialogue? You sound just as stupid as he is, for a different reason, but you're engaged in an activity of frivolity, of futility, there's nothing there to be accomplished. Choose your battles. Choose who you talk to. Make sure that when you talk, somebody's listening. So that's one type of fool. The other type of fool is a person who he's thought about it and he's inclined in a certain direction, but he isn't really sure that he's right. He's not sure. But that's where he's holding at the moment, like it was in my time, and maybe it still is, that when you go to college as a freshman, you're definitely an atheist. I mean, you won't have any friends if you're not. You'll have no social life. And it's a default position. Of course, you haven't read a single book on theism, belief in God, and you haven't read a single book on atheism either, but that's a default position. Such a person, if he's at all rational and at all has some distance from his own ego, if you say, do you know that for sure? We'll say, know it for sure. Look, that's what everybody is holding, and that's what people say, and that's where I am. And there's nothing particularly wrong with that. It's just, that's where he is. For such a person, you should open the dialogue with him, and you should interact with him, because if you don't do that, after 20 years, he'll say, I must be right, because nobody ever contradicted me. That seems to be what everybody's thinking. He'll be wise in his own eyes if you don't open the dialogue with him and talk to him. And these are the two different ones here, the wicked one on the one hand and the one who doesn't know how to ask. The wicked one is the one who's closed. He's not listening. He's already made up his mind. And that's why the interlocutor, the leader of the Seder, doesn't talk to him. He only talks about him. He doesn't engage with him in a conversation. God did this for me and not for him. Had he been there, he wouldn't have been redeemed. Who is the speaker speaking to? He's speaking to the other people at the Seder. He's not speaking to him. Which means, number one, and by the way, this is extremely important, he's at the Seder. He was invited. He wasn't excluded. But there's no point in dialogue because it won't be a dialogue. It'll just be a monologue from his side. Let me just finish this point and I'll take a question. So, that's the way we respond to his provocation. The one at the bottom doesn't know how to ask. Rabbi Kitov wants to explain he doesn't know how to ask the way the wicked son asks. He looks up to the wicked son. Look how he makes those frummies squirm. Look how he pokes his elbow in their ribs. They're really squirming when he tells. Well, I wish I could do that. I wish I had to do that. Just drive it into them. But I don't have self-confidence to do it because really I'm not as articulate as he is, not as smart as he is, as clever as he is. But he's the one who impresses me, and he's the one who I look up to. But if challenged on the issues, he could be open. He could be open to hear. For him, you open up the conversation. Now, we started off with the Chacham. We called him the wise son. Well, wisdom is a very powerful and nuanced English word, and Chacham is a powerful, nuanced Hebrew word. And when you look at the definitions of Chacham that we have in our literature, it doesn't match wisdom quite directly. One thing we say about a Chacham in our literature is the Chacham learns from every person. Learns from every person. He may be in his 60s, and the person that he's confronting is 19. He learns from every person. He may be a professor at university, and the 19-year-old is a freshman in college. He learns from every person. What kind of attitude is that? What kind of sort of stance is that? Well, number one, the first thought is he knows he's missing. He knows there's a lot he doesn't have. He's not under the impression that he knows everything, which calls to mind the famous quip of Mark Twain. He said, when I was 17, I was distressed by the fact that my father was so ignorant. And when I was 21, I was amazed by how much he learned in 4 years. You got the joke, right? I mean, he didn't learn so much in 4 years, just that at 17, he couldn't appreciate what his father knew. So the Chacham Samud is totally open. He's totally open to learn from everyone because he knows, number one, that he is missing understanding, and every person has something that he doesn't know. From a religious point of view, every person has a different soul. There are no duplicates, no clones in the souls, and each person is put into a circumstance where he has something to achieve and accomplish. And if a person would perceive that, he would learn something about the way the Creator expresses himself in the world that he couldn't learn from any other place. At any rate, the Chacham is a person who's totally open. Now, given what I told you about the wicked son, how would you describe him?
Closed.
Totally closed. He's not listening. He only has a send button. He talks, but he doesn't listen. There's no dialogue. So the Chacham and the Rasha, the wise and the wicked son, are opposites, which is nice for categorizing things. And now the other two sons are faint copies of the first two. The simple son is open. He asks, he wants to know, but he's very unsophisticated. So he says, what is this? And the one who doesn't know how to ask, who wishes he could ask like the wicked son, he's also closed, but not absolutely closed. Not absolutely closed, not completely closed. And the message to the person who's running the Seder is, know who you're talking to and deal with each person in terms of where he fits into this category. The degree of openness that he has determines in great part how you will interact with him. So it makes sense for it to be here at the beginning of the Haggadah. This was Eliyahu Kito's. I put in the business about Chacham and Rasha, but I think it's a very deep and very powerful observation. Now, you had a question that I...
So there's a law in Judaism not to embarrass your fellow Jew publicly. So at the Seder, when you're calling out the wicked son's question and you're turning to the rest of the congregation as opposed to addressing the wicked son, could that be considered embarrassment?
It could, but there are times when it's right to embarrass.
Okay.
And I see you're familiar already with the idea that all Talmudic rules have exceptions, and that's not a contradiction because that's not a Talmudic rule. So it's not a self-contradictory sentence. Yes?
I might have missed it, but do you have a mahala for the famous question? The Chacham says that God commanded you.
I'm coming to that. I didn't finish now. This was the first point that I wanted to make, but I have a lot about and that's what's coming up. Yeah. There's something in the back? No? Okay. Yeah.
I think in all the Passover Seders I've ever been to, no one, like this doesn't actually ever happen. Like it's the head guy who reads this is what it says in the Haggadah.
You haven't been to the traditional ones. Every child, starting at the age of 2 sometimes, or 3, because they have it on recordings and they sing it. And in some, they translate it into Yiddish, which is their vernacular, and each one gets a chance to say all 4 of them, right. And everybody congratulates them and praises them.
But they're not asking. They're singing and repeating.
But they understand the words. They understand the question. And then everybody says it out also, because a person's supposed to read the whole of the Haggadah, so everyone says it. That's the way it's done traditionally. And then the answers come. Yeah.
The kids aren't actually asking.
I don't see why you say that. They understand that because it's if they don't understand the Hebrew, it's translated into Yiddish, and they know that there are questions. They know there are questions that they are saying. That's why you say it, right?
And when we read the wise son, the evil son, all these different things.
That's the Manishtana. That's not this.
No, I'm speaking about this. When the kids ask the questions, they were taught these are the questions, and then we sing them at the Passover table. It's not like the kid is naturally curious. I wonder why we're doing this.
There are 2 different passages. We just went through the passage of the 4 sons.
Right.
That's not the 4 questions that the children ask. That's a different passage.
I'm saying
that different passage, everyone says it, and everyone knows that those are questions, and they're being asked. I don't see why that. Here, we're just talking about the 4 categories of people and what their attitudes are. This is not where the people doing the Seder are asking questions. You're thinking of the Manishtana. The Manishtana is prior to this. We did it yesterday, and it's a different passage.
But all these people are asking questions.
This is a description of different types of people with the questions that they have. This is not where we are asking questions, nor is the leader of the Seder asking a question, nor is anybody else who is asking a question. This is a description of different people with the questions that they have. Hopefully, the person who's reading it is in one of the categories, not more than one. It'd be quite difficult to be in more than one. These are not meant to be the questions that the reader is asking. But prior to this, there's what's the section called the 4 questions. There, everyone who says those questions is asking those questions. I think you're confusing 2 passages.
It says Mahu Omer.
That's right. This is sociology. There are people like this. What do they say? A person like this. What do they say? There's 4 different categories of people. A description of what that person says. It's not to say that I'm the reader and one of those people. I can't be all 4 of them.
Meaning Mahu Omer is more like, what would a person who is like this say?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's the wise son, whoever he is. What does he say?
What does the prototypical wise son say?
That's right.
Okay.
I mean, that's what the word said. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody else in the back? No.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
So, would you say that there's a way that somebody would answer a wicked not really a wicked son, but somebody who acts like this at the table today, or?
Well, it all depends upon where he's coming from. These are general classifications. There will be gray areas, and there'll be overlaps, and these are not precise classifications. It's to give you an indication of what you should be in your mind when you deal with a person, to try to understand where he stands in terms of this classification. Not more than that. Now let's ask the question that he just asked. The wise son says, "What are these various commandments that Hashem has commanded you?" The wicked son says, "What is his service to you?" We jump on the wicked son. To you, but not to him. He excluded himself. He's denied God because he's excluded himself. Why don't we jump on the wise son also?
Maybe it's because of the phrasing of the sentence.
Yeah. What in particular?
While the wise son is asking specifically about what the laws and testimonies and statutes are, the wicked son is basically trying to take the angle of pure denouncing. I've already come to the conclusion, and what do you mean by the service? What's the purpose of it? And he's not really looking for an answer. He's just looking for an objection.
I think your description is right, but you've missed the key proof. You missed the key proof, yeah?
Because he says Elokeinu.
He says, "What are these laws that Hashem, our God, has commanded you?" If he says our God, he can't be denying God. That's not on the page. Right? Of course, you could ask, why does he say our God commanded you? And the answer is he's not 13. So he's not yet addressed by the commandments. So he makes perfect sense, and there's no problem of associating him with the wicked son. Now, I have something to say about what it means if you exclude yourself from the congregation. That means you're denying God. How do we relate to the Creator? There's a principle in the Jewish tradition, uncontested, that your link to the Creator is through the people of Israel. There's no such thing as being connected to God without being identified with the people of Israel. And this is expressed. There are certain types of transgressions which carry a penalty of koros. The word koros means being cut off, and the implication is you're cut off from Hashem. And in one place, it actually says, if you perform this transgression, you'll be cut off from Hashem. In all the other places, it says you'll be cut off from the Jewish people. That's not meant as a shift in subject. It means that if you cut off from the Jewish people, you can't be connected to Hashem. You can't be. This person who says, there's a you and there's a me, and you guys are the Jews and I'm outside, he can't be connected to God. He can't be. So in that sense, he has denied because he's simply cut himself off from relating to the Creator. That's one way to put it together.
He's not part of the Jewish people.
That's what he says. He says, when he says God has commanded you, it means commanded you and not me. Why not? Why not? Here we're talking about someone, it isn't because he's less than 13. And here the Haggadah says, since he says God commanded you, but and not me, so then that command doesn't apply to me. Why not? Because God commanded Jews, and I'm not part of that. So
Non-Jews also have a connection to God.
right, but not with this commandment, not with these commandments. Right? Non-Jew is not commanded to keep Pesach, and he's talking about here the Paschal sacrifices, Paschal performances. So that would be a way of connecting that. Now, let's go back to the Chacham. So you're supposed to answer him according to the laws of Pesach, and it gives the example of don't have anything to eat after you eat the Paschal sacrifice. And by the way, that's carried out today, because even though we don't have the Paschal sacrifice, we eat extra matzah at the end of the meal in place of the Paschal sacrifice, and the custom is not to eat anything afterwards. Drinking water is permitted by most, but the idea is to have the taste last. So first of all, if I would rank the laws of the Seder and rank them in terms of importance, centrality, severity, this would probably be on the bottom. It's there, but of all the laws and all the consequences of failure, it's probably the least significant. So one thing that you're being told here about the wise son is you can trust him. You can trust him to tell something which other people would say, oh, really? Are you going that far? Do you really mean that? You can't be serious. That's obviously over the top. Yeah, it's over the top. But if the Creator set up a system and the people who have lived that system have derived this rule, then it's not over the top. I'm not going to judge that it's over the top. I want to learn what it says. And you can trust him not to rebel against a law of this type. And I just want to give it just a little framework where this type of idea is stressed in everyday activities. There are certain types of activities where there's an exquisite effort to control every detail. Every detail. Let's take playing Beethoven's symphony. So first of all, there are the notes on the page. I'm speaking as a musician. There are notes on the page. Those notes you have to play. Now, if you play the violin, then the concertmaster, who's called the first violinist, will say to the whole group of violinists, play this note on an up bow, not on a down bow. Don't do that. And several notes can be played on more than one string. Play it on this string, not on that string. And vibrato, when you wiggle your finger and the note shakes a little bit, he'll tell you how much vibrato to do, and how hard to press the bow on the string. Everything is going to be planned out. Why? Is this obsessive compulsive? No, because it makes a difference the way the music sounds. It's a little difference? Yeah, it's a difference. It's a little difference. All little differences count. If you end a piece on a major chord, if you know anything about music, the middle tone of the major chord is played a little sharp, a little higher than usual, because it gives it a sharp, brilliant sound. That's how you end on that kind of note. So the control of details is down to the tiniest detail. Let's take ballet. What do you think a ballet dancer is thinking about when he jumps? Well, one thing is, I don't want to break my ankle when I land. He's definitely thinking about that. But if he's good, then he's thinking about his fingers. Should they be relaxed or should they be stiff together or separate? Eyebrows! What expression do I have on my face? Because he's portraying with his body some message. And every piece of the body can play a role in that message. And that's why the costumes are there, and that's why the music is there, and the lighting is there. All of that contributes to conveying the message. And you try to control every detail. Same thing's true in football. When the team is making a play, and he's got to go up the center and then turn to the left, it's 16 steps up the center, not 17 and not 15. And it's turned to the left on a 50-degree angle, not a 40-degree angle, not a 30-degree angle, but a 50-degree angle. That's how the play is run, so that the quarterback can pass it and find him exactly there when he throws the ball. So 30 degrees or 40 degrees, come on, you really, that makes a difference? Yeah, it makes a difference. One way he catches the ball, the other way he doesn't catch the ball. So there are things in life where you want to control every detail to the extent that you can because it contributes to the outcome. Torah is like that. Torah is a kind of performance of actions which are very important, and the more you control the details, the more impact the actions can have. And that's something that the Chacham understands. He says, yeah, oh, look at that. The last thing I eat, the last thing that I taste for the rest of the evening, that's something which was the most important thing of the evening. And that taste staying in my mouth continues that consciousness to a certain extent, and that's worth doing. That's one of the things here. Yeah.
Don't we have 2 more cups of wine after this, though?
You do have, but if you were talking about meat, which it was, then we're talking about the Paschal sacrifice here. Yeah. Okay, we're together. Let's see. Did I skip something here?
So if we don't do meat, if we still do matzah, then why does it still apply?
Because you want to carry through as much of the same performance as you can, even when you don't have the whole of the performance. This is a general rule. Indeed, there's a principle of conservatism built into Jewish practice. Some of you know that when you read the Torah on Shabbos, after you finish reading from the Torah scroll, there's a reading from the prophets. Might be a scroll also. We here use a scroll, but there is a reading from the prophets. Why is that? What's that got to do with anything? Well, there was a period of time when the non-Jewish governments forbade reading the Torah. And you don't have to die in order to keep that mitzvah. If they say you can't read the Torah and otherwise we're going to kill you, you don't read the Torah. So what they did was they created a reading of prophetic writings which in content reminds you of the content of the portion that you would have read from the Torah. Then that kingdom passed from the history, and then the decree passed from history, and we still read it. Because we say it wasn't an accident that history devolved in such a way that we had to substitute something, and that substitution now has its own life, it has its own role, and we continue it. So there's a built-in conservatism in Jewish practice. So here you have something which is taking the place of the Paschal sacrifice, then you treat it like the Paschal sacrifice to the extent that you can.
Is Mayim Achronim also like that?
I'm sorry?
Is Mayim Achronim also like that?
Oh, Mayim Achronim is very interesting. The Gemara gives a reason. Mayim Achronim means before you say the grace after meals, after you've eaten bread, you had a whole meal, you should wash your hands before you say the final prayer. And the Gemara says it's because of a certain type of salt, which I saw in the commentaries recently. Not only did they use the salt, but they also dipped their hands in the salt to take off the gravy from their hands. So they really had contact with this salt, and it was dangerous. If it got into your eyes, it could blind you. So the question of washing. Okay, we don't use that kind of salt anymore. So the Shulchan Aruch starts with the words Mayim Achronim Chovah. It's an obligation, which is what the Gemara says, and then 6 paragraphs later he says, but in our times you don't have to do it because we don't have the salt anymore. Gaon of Vilna says, true, we don't have the salt anymore, but you should still do it. Why? If you don't have the salt, because when the rabbis said it's because of the salt, they only gave you one of the reasons for doing it. But there are other reasons. And those reasons still apply. You don't have to know them? Okay. The Gaon of Vilna was a great Kabbalist, among other things. They say at his time he was the greatest Kabbalist in the world. So now the question is, okay, there are those other reasons. Should those other reasons be codified in law, or shouldn't they? The Shulchan Aruch, the master of the Shulchan Aruch, who was also a Kabbalist, held legally, no, we can't obligate people to do it. Vilna Gaon says there's still reasons to do it. So the question is, how complete a picture do we have of the way in which the thing is operating? Someone who doesn't do it today, you can't call him out. So you can't say anything because that's according to the strict law. But someone who does do it, you can't call him out either because there are reasons to do it, even if they're not forced on you by law. Yes, in the back.
Can Rabbi explain the answer we get to the tum a little bit? It just seems linguistically like the answer doesn't directly connect to the question. What's this? With a strong hand, Hashem took us out from Egypt. Like it doesn't. What exactly is Mazo saying? Like, and then all the other questions, all the other answers flow nicely, but this one, like, they just seem disconnected.
That's a good question. I think the answer is this. We're not told at what point in the Seder did he say, what is this? We're not told what he was pointing to when he said, what is this? It could mean that just, I see a whole pageant here. What's going on? And then the answer is, we are commemorating a particular event in history. And that's an introduction. Okay, so that's what's going on in general. Then he could go on and say, well, so how does this work? How does that work? How does that work? But it's like the first step in the dialogue. I think that would be a way to understand it. Yeah, your question?
Again, just briefly with the wine thing, because it's saying we're not supposed to eat dessert after the final taste of the Pesach, the sacrifice, that we have the taste of meat in our mouth. But if we drink wine, then we no longer have the taste of meat in your mouth. You said they also forbid water.
I've never tried it because I never had the meat as the last thing, but apparently rich meat will stay in your mouth even if you drink wine. Yeah.
My help answer that. When you drink wine, and there are certain lambs that you drink wine with and it pairs well with, and the flavor is gonna last throughout it's meat. It stays with you.
Yeah.
Now, there's an introduction to this passage of the four sons, and I want to explain that a little bit. It says, blessed is, now in Hebrew it's hamakom, which literally means the place. Where is this, Geneva? Blessed is the place? No. It's a way of referring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? Blessed is the Creator. We have to understand why he would be called hamakom. Blessed is the one who gave Torah to the Jewish people. Blessed is he. And then it says, the Torah spoke about four sons. And it says, so it uses the word Baruch, blessed, 4 times. So it says blessed 4 times. There are 4 sons. Probably there's a connection there. So first of all, the use of the word hamakom to refer to God is rabbinic. Even though there is a verse in the Torah, and the commentaries talk about it, but really it's rabbinic. And the idea, as explained by the Kabbalists, is this. Let's think about space, even without relativity, and virtual particles and all the rest. Think about space. Well, space is the precondition for the existence of everything physical. A table takes up space. No space, there are no tables, and no pigeons, and no clouds, no sand, no people. Space is a precondition for every physical thing to exist. Space makes possible the existence of physical things. Without space, it would be impossible. So the word makom abstractly refers to that which makes something possible, gives it its possibility of existence. And this is how the creation process is described in Kabbalistic terms. The first move is to set up the possibility of there being anything other than the Creator. And the second step is to realize that possibility. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu would be being called makom here in the sense of the way in which space is a precondition for the existence of the physical. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself is the precondition for the existence of everything. And this is brought even in the philosophical books, not even in the Kabbalistic books. If God were not there, or if he would remove his creative activity, nothing would exist. It would just simply cease to exist. He's giving it its existence all the time. Everything that exists other than God depends upon God for it to be able to exist. So he is the condition of its possibility. That's one way that you can understand God being called makom here. And that becomes the introduction to the 4, which applies, of course, to all 4. Applies to all 4. Now, the question will be, do we really want to apply it to all 4? In particular, Do we want to apply the idea of blessed to the wicked son? And there is a Pri Tzaddik who comments on a Rashi. There's a verse where the Kodesh Baruch Hu says to the Jewish people that they're going to go to the land of Israel and their children will inherit it. And it says that the children, they bow down and praise the Kodesh Baruch Hu for the wonderful thing that he told them. And Rashi says that the thing that they're bowing down and praising God for is that they were told that they will have children. The children will inherit it. Told they will have children. But the Pri Tzaddik points out that the verse that's being talked about is the verse that's said here to the wicked son. It's a verse that describes the asking of the wicked son. So it comes out, according to the way the Pri Tzaddik analyzes it, Rashi's telling me, they knew they were going to have children, and they knew that some of them would be wicked, and they praised God for that. Why would that be? And says the Pri Tzaddik, because they were also promised that no matter how low he goes, he'll come back. There's always a way to come back. So it meant that no matter what the variation is in the children and how they grow up, and as one said, maybe when he's a teenager, I'm sure you're already 20, so that's you had the freedom to say that. Teenagers are rebellious. Right? It's not in their brain, it's in their blood. It's in their DNA. So the idea is that no one's going to be totally lost. Now, this is a difference of opinion among various authorities, but there are those who say once the Torah was given, no Jew is ultimately lost, no matter what he does. There's always something that brings him back. So that would be where the word Baruch, the blessedness applies even to the son who temporarily is off track. Yeah.
But so then why do we answer him so harshly? Why is it such a harsh answer, even though you think for him I'd even go even softly?
Why do we answer him so harshly? Have you heard of tough love?
I have. But
you have, okay.
when you're trying to bring some,
You never did anything wrong. You never had to experience it. It was never done to you. Let me tell you something. If you don't hold your children up to standards, you're sending them a message. You're a failure. You have no capabilities. You're just incompetent and incapable. When you express to your children standards, that means you're giving them a vote of confidence. One way to reprimand a child, which I think is very beautiful, is to say, I didn't expect that of you. I know you're better than that. You didn't have to do that. You're expressing disapproval, but you're expressing it by showing your vote of confidence in him that he can do better than that. He's better than that. So, but that's disapproval. And showing disapproval is very important.
that makes sense, but here it seems like they're saying you're cut off from us. You're not part of us.
No, we're not saying that. We're saying that he's saying that. He said, what is this service to you rather than to us? Well, if that's what he said. His words are saying that he's cut off. Indeed, often when you draw out the implication of someone else's words, he may not have realized that that's what he was implying. There's something called active listening. When somebody says something, according to active listening, what you say back is, I want to make sure I understood you. I heard you say X, Y, Z. Did I get you right? Now, when I say that to a person, it means I care about him and I care about his message enough to get it right. That's an act of honoring him, right? But also when he hears X, Y, Z, he may think, oh, wow, I didn't realize that I was committing myself to that, and he might change his mind. Because when he hears it fed back to him, the way I heard it, he may say, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean to imply that, and change it. That's very valuable. So giving a person feedback, including negative feedback, is a very valuable. It's a statement of confidence. You know, when we say when a person who's a good person punishes, there are two positive implications of punishment. One is you could have done better. Otherwise, why? If he did his best, there's no point in punishing him. And number two, what you do matters. Because even if you did something wrong, it didn't make any difference, so then wouldn't bother punishing him. Punishment is a very positive, powerful statement. Not talking punishing with revenge and not punishing out of anger. But if you're punishing in this way, the recipient of the punishment feels honored by it and uplifted by it and energized by it and focused by it. Wow, what I'm doing matters, and I could do better, so I want to have a reason to do better. But if you don't give them negative feedback, implicitly, you're sending a signal that you're not capable of any better. And there's another one that has has this implicit thing, and it's associated with certain political groups, so I'll mention it. Let everybody live his own life. Everybody should be autonomous and make his own decisions. Sometimes what that really means is, don't bother me. You want to drown? Drown on your own. Don't bother me. I don't want to take responsibility for you. Everybody should make his own decisions. And I can walk home and just ignore everybody else. That's not productive. That's not kind. That's not respectful. That's just disinterest in other people, which is really despicable. So these things are tricky. Okay, fine. We'll pick it up in Yetz Hashem on Sunday with Q&A.
Thank you.